Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review and rant on the fifth installment in the Rambo franchise, Rambo, Last Blood. More like Rambo, Last Thud, or Rambo, Last Dud, because this is a dud of a sequel. It had an opportunity to maybe be an explosive, fun ride, but instead it just fizzles out and doesn't really do much to really provide a reason for its existence other than a way for Stallone to placate his ego, or a way for Stallone and his new production company and Millennium Films to make a quick buck off of the Rambo character and his story. And it's really a shame that Rambo, as a franchise, and the character John Rambo now has a film like this that is one of those clear instances of a cash grab. I never felt that was the case with any of the other four films. And on top of that, this film sucks, so it's the first film in the Rambo franchise that isn't any good. So not only is it unnecessary, but it's also bad. So why even bother? Why does this film exist? Why do we have Rambo Last Blood? Why wasn't this just called The Last Border? And it was just its own separate story about sex trafficking and the Mexican cartel, and Stallone playing a character who's an ex-Vietnam vet who's dealing with PTSD, and then decides to build a bunch of tunnels and in order to help him cope, and then he uses those in the climax and takes out all of these bad guys and gets revenge. Why couldn't it just be that? Yeah, it might be derivative. It might be one of those things where some people will be like, this character is a little bit too much like Rambo, but then it wouldn't be a slap in the face to the character of John Rambo. It wouldn't be as insulting if it was just its own thing. And what makes things even more frustrating is that Stallone himself, at one point in time in his career and in his life, didn't even want to do another Rambo movie. In 2010, he was interviewed, and he actually said this: I think Rambo's pretty well done. I don't think that there will be any more. I feel with Rocky Balboa, the character came complete circle. He went home. But for Rambo to go on another adventure might be, I think, misinterpreted as a mercenary gesture and not necessary. I don't want that to happen. What happened, Sly? Why did your mindset shift? You had the right idea there. You knew that there was no reason to do another one. You probably were pretty happy with how Rambo 2008 ended things, just like a lot of fans were. I still feel to this day Rambo 2008 is one of the best examples of a sequel multiple years in the making that ultimately does get a release decades later after the last installment, and it's not only really good, but it's respectful, and it provides the perfect end cap to the franchise and to its characters. And then this film comes along and fucking ruins all that and fucks it all up. And Stallone himself at one point had the right idea and not even doing this. So what the fuck happened? Either it's an ego thing, or it's a money thing, or it's both. Because there's no reason for me to believe for one fucking second that this screenplay that they ultimately went with was good enough for Stallone to be like, yeah, let's do this. This is going to be a great entry for the Rambo franchise. I do think it is. It's a combo of ego and money. Stallone and his ego, well, he wanted to do a movie where he could be a Western kind of character. He could go around and ride on his horses, play Roy Rogers on a ranch, and wear a cowboy hat. And instead of just doing a western, he decided he was going to do a Rambo movie and insert western characterizations and western tropes and stuff into Last Blood. Also, he wanted to do a film that featured Rambo with a daughter because he has daughters. So he wanted to have that element of the plot into this film as well. Even though it comes completely out of nowhere, there's no previous establishment of even how Rambo came across this family. Maybe it's something I missed. Maybe it's in the director's cut. But regardless, what I did see and what I remember seeing, there is no context to any of this. So it feels like it's something that is just completely shoehorned into things. It's just taking this plot line and this bit of character development with Rambo becoming like an adopted, well, not really an adopted, well, kind of an adopted member of this family, and then him becoming a father figure for this girl. It feels like it's a square peg shoved into a Rambo hole. Like, it doesn't even match. And then in terms of cash grab, it was released in theaters. And it might be the last film that Stallone stars in that will get a theatrical release. I hope that's not the case, but it very well might be. Might be the last cash grab. And another thing, like, if you're going to do Rambo 5, I wish they just did the Hunter thing, where Rambo goes up against some genetically engineered monster in the snow. Yeah, it's over the top. Yeah, it's not really a lot like the other films in the franchise, but at least it would be something different, and at least I would see Rambo against a creature. I would see Stallone in a creature feature movie. Something I've been wanting to see. Instead of this generic, forgettable pile of indifference that is Rambo Last Blood. The screenplay by Matthew Krulnick and Sylvester Stallone, it's a cruel game and a cruel joke to play on Rambo fans. It does nothing to move the story forward. Remember that really memorable quote that Rambo said in Rambo 4? Live for nothing or die for something. Your call. You know, that one? It's a good quote. Apparently, Rambo didn't take his own advice. Because what did he live for? What did he ultimately die for, if he is going to die? Revenge. Didn't die, didn't sacrifice it, or put his life at risk saving other people, like the missionaries and the Karen rebels. No, revenge. Personal reasons. Seems like it's closer to Stallone's failed Death Wish movie, which I don't know why I didn't just do that. Change the title around, do something like that. If you want to do a revenge movie, then just do a revenge movie. Why do you have to make Rambo a revenge story? Especially one as generic and as pathetic as this. There were points in this film where if you were channel surfing and you just flipped to this movie in the middle of the running time, you wouldn't even know it's a Rambo film. You would see scenes with the niece and her going to Mexico, and then you would see scenes with Rambo riding around on a horse, and you'd be like, what is this? You should never have that moment when you're watching a Rambo movie. Anytime you flip on a Rambo film, you should be like, yeah, it's a Rambo movie. This? No. There would be zero reason for you to think this is a Rambo film until you see scenes where some guy's reading off Stallone's ID and he's Rambo, or you hear bits of the Rambo music. That's the only reason why you would even think that this is a Rambo movie. And the storyline, I just don't. I really think this story sucks. Rambo, I guess he's living at his father's horse ranch, and that makes sense. But this whole insertion of this family and this niece, I don't know where the fuck this comes from. Apparently, there's this old friend of his named Maria, and she has a granddaughter named Gabriella, and she's like a daughter to Rambo now. And the film does nothing to really establish their connection. They are just there. What happened to his father? I didn't know he was dead. I thought it was insinuated that he might be alive. And that's why he went to the ranch at the end of Rambo. Is that he was going to try to reconcile with his father. Why didn't we have that? If you were going to do a continuation of this, why didn't you have something involving Rambo's dad? Why this whole thing with this random family, this Hispanic family, that there had been absolutely nothing in any of the other films that had established that Rambo even knew any of these people. But okay, he settles down and he's been relaxing and helping raise this kid for 11 years after the events of Rambo 4, and he's been dealing with PTSD, but the film does nothing with that because it only focuses on it once. That's all they do. There's one scene with Rambo having a PTSD moment in the tunnels, and that's it. Has some flashbacks to Vietnam footage, but it's not even footage from the movies. Like, if you are going to have PTSD flashbacks, wouldn't it make sense that you would have footage from the Rambo films in terms of the PTSD, like in the other movies? This has the same amount of PTSD moments as the other films in the franchise, if not less. And those moments were more effective. Like in First Blood, when they're gonna shave him dry, and then he has a PTSD flashback to Vietnam when he's being tortured and cut up, or in other films in the series. Rambo 2, there's another moment like that. So why even have a scene like that in the first place? If you're not even gonna do that much with it. All you show is documentary footage and news footage from Vietnam. Why would Rambo have a flashback like that? Wouldn't it be more personal? Since when do people have flashbacks to news footage and stock footage? When does that fucking happen? I guess only in the movies, apparently. So yeah, he's got PTSD flashbacks once throughout the entire movie. He's taken pills. We don't really get much context with that either. And I guess in order to deal with his PTSD, he's building tunnels. And unless you were familiar with the Vietnam War and the fact that the Viet Cong built tunnels, there's no reason why you would even think for a second that Rambo would really want to be spending all his time building tunnels. There's not even really a reason to think that he was a tunnel rat. There wasn't even anything established in the other films that he was a tunnel rat. But okay, he's building these tunnels, doing all this. Then there's this whole thing with Gabriella, and she's being stubborn, and she wants to go see her real father. Rambo tells her that he's a piece of shit. She has this moment where it seems like she's going to take his advice, but then of course she doesn't because we need a conflict. So she goes to Mexico against his orders because she's being stupid, and then she meets her father. Her father's a piece of shit. He's an asshole. She meets up with this other former friend of hers who's clearly not someone that you should trust just by the way that she's acting. And she trusts her. She gets sold into sex trafficking. Rambo then gets in his truck, gets in his pickup, goes to Mexico, tries to get her back, gets his ass kicked, because that's exactly what fans of the Rambo franchise want to see in another Rambo movie, is Rambo being a fucking pussy and getting his ass beat, and then having some fucking gringo puto carve a fucking X in his face. And these villains, too, the way that they are written is awful. There's no reason to give a shit about any of them. They aren't memorable in any way. They don't have any real personality. They might as well just be a bunch of fucking cardboard or plastic bags that are blowing around in the fucking wind. So you have these generic, forgettable villains. They try to make him more effective because of how they beat up Rambo, but it doesn't make any sense because, yes, Rambo's older now, but Rambo has been established in all these other films as being this larger than life persona, this guy who can take a lot of punishment, who can kick a lot of ass, and to have that moment where he just gets beat down, yeah, it's different, but it's not something that you want out of a Rambo movie. Also, you'd like to see Rambo using explosive tipped arrows. That's not in the film. Apparently, one of the drafts that was in the movie, but for some reason, Stallone Company decided against that. No C4 tipped explosive arrows. That's a weird choice, but okay. So, Rambo gets his ass kicked. He gets beat up so badly and humiliated so much that he's out cold for 4 days. He gets rescued by this random reporter character who was only established previously in a bar scene. And by the way, this whole film and this story is a total snooze fest until the tunnel massacre, because barely nothing of note or nothing at all happens for the first hour. Rambo interrogates some guy to get the location of where his niece might be, and there's a bit of a brutal moment that I thought was wince-inducing, where he pulls the guy's collarbone out after he breaks it to get him to tell him where the location is, but that really wasn't much of anything. He gets his ass beat, gets some help from the reporter who helped him out because she has a personal connection to these villains, these bad guys who killed her sister. So then you have a really lame bit of action where Rambo takes a hammer and beats up on a bunch of guys, gets the girl, but she is too far gone because she has been stabbed with a bunch of needles full of drugs, and she's strung out, and she's been left to die, and she ultimately dies in the car ride home. And it's supposed to be this really emotional scene, but it didn't do anything for me because I didn't really care that much for Gabrielle as a character. I don't give a shit. And then Rambo decides, fuck it. She's dead. They took away everything from me, so I'm going to go out there and I'm going to take him out. And he goes back to Mexico, stabs a bunch of people in a really lame way, just takes a knife and just goes, that's it. He decapitates one of the bad guys. It's the brother of the lead bad guy. but it's all an aftermath thing. And there's a cool shot of him driving away with in his truck and throwing his severed head out the window and rolling it down the highway. But it's all aftermath. Why couldn't you just have a scene where he actually cuts the guy's head off? Why does it have to be an aftermath shot? Why are you trying to be artistic? It's Rambo. And then it sets up the Tunnel Massacre, where the main bad guy and his men follow Rambo, go to his ranch, and get picked off one by Rambo in various bloody, gory ways. And I have to admit, those sequences are pretty satisfying. They're pretty badass. Taking a shotgun, blowing guys' heads off, cutting limbs off, stabbing people with pipes and pitchforks. And then the arrows, taking people out with arrows, grabs his arrows and nails the bad guy with them, and he rips his heart out. Although that moment was a little much, I understand why they had it there, because his friend Maria talks about how her heart has been ripped out and so on and so forth. So then he decides to rip this guy's heart out. But it was like something out of Temple of Doom or Mortal Kombat. It was too over the top. It was to the point where it was like, okay, I appreciate the fact that it's practical, but this doesn't really feel like a Rambo move. And like I said, if this was a different movie, this was not a Rambo film, I would probably be more into him ripping the guy's heart out. And then the film ends with him riding off in the sunset. Probably gonna bleeding out and dying in the wilderness. Because if you think about it, his wounds are very severe. Look at the amount of blood that he's losing in the final sequences in this film. He's also an older man, so wounds don't heal nearly as well as they might have when he was younger. He's probably gonna ride off into the wilderness on that horse, bleed out, and die alone. Great! Fucking wonderful! That's exactly what I want out of what probably will wind up being the last film in the Rambo franchise. Live for nothing. Or die for something. Or die for nothing, apparently. Die for revenge, and then die alone. Great, Rambo dies alone in the wilderness. Fuck this movie. But he doesn't actually die. Use your head. There's no medical help. There's no medical support. There's nobody out there. He's in the middle of fucking nowhere. He's on a horse. Horses don't go that fast. He's not going to find attention quick enough. He's going to fucking die. Just like the idea of a fifth Rambo film should have died. It should have been DOA. This is just not needed at all. And then when it comes to the performances by the cast, it's nothing special. Stallone's performance as Rambo is mediocre at best. It doesn't feel like Rambo. It's almost like his performance is modeled after a retired Cobra. Because think about it. He's using the same guttural lower register for his voice. And maybe Cobra might retire and go to a ranch and really get into horse riding. I don't know, but it just doesn't really feel like a Rambo performance because of the way that Stallone handles it. It also doesn't help either that he has a ton of dialogue, which is atypical to what normally happens with Rambo. Rambo is usually a character that is a man of very few words. And with this, there's just too many lines of dialogue. And it doesn't feel like it works with the character. It feels out of place. Paz Vega as Carmen Delgado. She was there but she didn't really have anything to do. She was just the reporter lady who helped Rambo a little bit. Had some lines of dialogue where she explained to him that she feels the same pain that he does, and that's it. Sergio Peris-Mencheta is Hugo Martinez. Uh, the guy was just a douchebag. Your typical douchebag character who joins a long list of other forgettable douchebag characters. Victor Martinez, played by Óscar Jaenada, who's the main bad guy, wasn't really that intimidating, wasn't that memorable, wasn't that enjoyable or entertaining. There was nothing to this fucking guy. Like I said, he's a fucking he's a plastic bag in the wind. Or he could just be air. Maybe he's not even a plastic bag. He's just fucking air. And then you have Adriana Barraza as Maria and Yvette Monreal as Gabriela. Those are the main characters. I mean, you also have Giselle, Maria, not Maria, Gabriella's former friend. But But yeah, I mean, Adriana Barraza, I guess she was the one that delivered the second best performance in the film. But I still didn't really care that much for the character because they do nothing to establish these characters. They just throw you in. Okay, Rambo's living with his family now, and he's friends with them, and he's close with them. And I'm like, why should I think that they're close? What is their connection? You got to give me more than just a few lines of dialogue and pictures on the wall. And Gabriella was just stupid in terms of the way that her character was written. Why would you do that? Why would you not listen to what has been your father for all these years? Why would you go to Mexico without supervision, without anybody there, and go see your father who's not been a part of your life at all? Why would you give a shit what he thinks? Why would you want to hear why he left? Why? I don't understand. Like if I was in that situation, I'd be like, fuck him. I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck about him. I don't care about seeing him or hearing his side of the story and why he left my mom who was stricken with cancer and doesn't want anything to do with me because it wouldn't be healthy for me. Because more than likely he's just going to say, I don't like you and I didn't want anything to do with you. And that's exactly what happened. Although the way that that was written was very clunky and heavy-handed. Like, come on now. Like really? I understand that there are people who are assholes, but the level of assholery from her dad in the scene where he tells her that I didn't want you, I never wanted you. It was ridiculous. It was so overwrought. It was unbelievable. Like, come on now. Like, yeah, he's totally going to be that mean. It just felt like it was completely unbelievable to me. I half expected him to be like, yeah, I never wanted you, and your mom was a fucking whore and a bitch, and fuck you, you fucking piece of shit, gringa puta. Oh, man. So, yeah, the performances, nothing special. The score by Brian Tyler, it's a letdown because most of it is just reused cues from Rambo 2008 or other Rambo movies, and they feel just as out of place as the rest of the plot does. You have a moment in this film where they use Battle Adagio from Rambo, one of my favorite scores by Brian Tyler, and it doesn't work. It feels forced, and it also feels like that music is cheapened in some way because it's used in this film. And I hate that. I hate that this exists because it does. It cheapens the Rambo franchise as a whole because of its existence. The cinematography by Brendan Galvin. There wasn't a single shot in this that really impressed me on any level. Neither does the editing by Toddy Miller and Karsten Kerpenek, except maybe during the tunnel massacre scene. I admit it, that was pretty well edited. But the other stuff, nothing. Nothing special. You know you have a bad sequel when some of the best things about the movie are only like 5 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes of the overall running time, and the other moments are just flashback scenes, just clips from the other films in the franchise during the end credits. And it cost $50 million. Where did this budget go? This does not look like a $50 million movie. This looks like a $10 million film. I don't know where the fucking budget went because it does not at all look like a $50 million movie. And for a film that's only 89 minutes, because I watched the US version, not the international cut with the beginning where Rambo saves people in a flood and plus a few other scenes. I don't think those other scenes would really help. I don't think they would make the movie better. I honestly think they'd probably make the film worse because they would make it even more slow-paced and even more boring and even more dull. So yeah, as you can see, I'm not a fan of Rambo: Last Blood. This film is anemic. It's slow. It's boring. It's plodding. The only thing that is remotely any good or satisfying in any way is the Tunnel Massacre, but even that is fairly short. And that has its issues too, like the song choice. I don't like the choice of the Doors song. It doesn't really click. It doesn't fit. I don't know why Rambo would choose that song. And it's just a film that exists. And it didn't need to exist. And that's what's so upsetting, is that it exists. It's a turd. It's the last turd that plops out of Rambo's ass that wound up in the toilet bowl, and then the producers and Stallone and the writers scooped it up and then threw it at the screen. It stinks. That's right. It stinks!